Sam Shaw here, founder of WSMM Mastermind. Excited to be back there with another client interview for you guys. We have Chris on with us today. Chris, finished going through the summer 2022 recruiting process. I guess it's been a couple months now, but we haven't had a chance to get together till now. So I'm excited to get him on here to just kind of talk to you guys about his journey and how he got to where he is today. And he had a very good outcome in the end. And so, Chris, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, man.
Yeah, no, happy to talk.
Awesome, man. So if you don't mind, like before we dive into kind of your story and all that, maybe you can just give people a high level introduction overview of kind of who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I go to a semi-target in the Southeast. I'm from the Southeast as well. Growing up, my parents were both in tech, and I was pre-med in high school and my freshman year in college. And I found out about banking through a friend I met in undergrad, and I was pretty clueless going into the process. But I knew this was what I wanted to do just because I heard it's the career in finance that provides probably the most exit opportunities. I think everybody knows that. And being unsure, I just figured, I basically at one point I was dead set on investment banking, but I really didn't know what to do. And I tried a lot of different methods for preparing for interviews and sort of figuring out how to break in per se. And I found out about Wall Street Mastermind through actually someone I interned with at a boutique, and he told me, if your heart is dead set on investment banking, you have to go through this program. And I at that point I was pretty much as dead set as I thought I could be. So I went through with it, and the rest is history.
Got it. Okay. I remember that. I know who you're talking about, the person that you interviewed with, but and he got a really great offer as well. But talk to me about up to that point, because you joined Wall Street Mastermind, I think halfway through your sophomore year, right?
Yeah. December of 2020. Yeah, December of 2020.
Yeah. Okay. So prior to that, because you had already known you wanted to do banking for a while by the time you joined, right?
Yeah, for at least I'd say probably 11 months, basically a year. Yeah.
Okay. So for that first 11 months, what were the things that you were doing on your own? Because I'm curious, what were the resources you were using, and what were some of the things that you felt like you were still struggling with that made you want to seek out additional help beyond what you were already doing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So in preparation for interviews, well, first of all, I was networking with people that I met on LinkedIn, or people that were alumni from my school on LinkedIn. But it wasn't really, I felt like I was getting calls because I was really persistent with emailing, but I felt like once I got on the calls, they weren't really that effective. So that was one sort of roadblock that I faced. In terms of technical preparation, I was using the Wall Street Oasis guide, mainly the M&I, the 400 question bank. I'm sure everybody knows about it. Basically trying to memorize that, pretty much cookie cutter answers for those who have read through it. So that didn't really separate me as much as I wanted to, especially when I was starting mock interviews with people at my school, career centers and stuff. But yeah, definitely struggling in sort of differentiating myself and having sort of a structure in attacking or approaching technical preparation, because I really didn't know where to start. I was sort of tackling the guides in a very arbitrary fashion. I wasn't being methodical about it, basically. So that basically I was getting things confused, and it just didn't make sense in my mind. So how was it gonna come out coherently in an interview? And with the networking, you already know, I was getting calls, but it was I really didn't know how to get them to take the extra step and actually give me an interview, especially if it was at a bulge bracket bank, a bank or like elite boutique, those processes are super competitive. And I think like the most like discouraging part of it all was just because I knew like based on like the sheer statistics, it was such a low probability of getting in. So there was also sort of like an element of like sort of like not being, or like sort of being discouraged throughout the process, not really knowing, sort of going into it. As I mentioned, I was a pre-med student, sort of kind of being clueless on the whole thing was difficult to go through. So Wall Street Mastermind definitely helped with that.
Got it. Okay. So then, like, you kind of already mentioned at that point, the reason why you came across Wall Street Mastermind and decided to join was because I guess you knew someone else. I guess it's like a fellow intern at your internship who had already gone through it and he got good results, which I guess what got you curious about like just what this program is. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Basically, he had gone through the program, that previous recruiting cycle, and he basically I still remember a call. I was actually talking to him. I was trying to sort of network with him because he had a really good internship, and he told me about the program. He basically said, listen, if you're dead set on investment banking, you have to go through this program. It's like, well, he didn't say like you have to go through it, but it's like pretty much like, what do you have to lose? Like you're gonna be pretty helpless if you don't have, like a mentor, or like a community to like sort of fall back on, going through like such a competitive process. It was much harder than I could conceive at the time.
Yeah. So then you came into the program, based on his recommendation. Like, what were some of the things that you did after you joined the program? And I guess for our listeners, because most of our listeners they haven't gone through the program yet. So like from the outside looking in, the question that a lot of people always have is like, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference between what you did afterwards versus what you were already doing on your own? Because they're thinking, like, why can't I just do all this on my own, right? Like, so was there a difference? And if so, like, what were some of those differences, I guess?
Yeah, no, it was like a day and night difference, just especially not having any structure going into it. So, firstly, the first thing you do in Wall Street Mastermind is you make like the behavioral questionnaire, which was like super helpful. Basically, I think 18 or so questions, I think, with like had its own like additional parts. But anyways, it basically encapsulates everything you need to sort of know about yourself to ace like the behavioral section, or at least any possible question that could be asked in the behavioral part of the interview. That guide will have somewhere, or somewhere within the guide will be the answer to pretty much any question they'll ask you. So that really helped me synthesize about like all the data I needed, like for my life, all my experiences, all the possible, like weaknesses, strengths, scenarios. Like God knows how many scenarios I try to think about before I had that guide. It was like I was driving myself nuts. Probably like 15, 20 different scenarios for each question. I was driving myself crazy, and I think that guide definitely gave my thoughts a lot of structure, and definitely helped in preparing. Um, Secondly, I think your videos, you basically have a bunch of videos going through the technical aspects, which are super helpful. And they're in a very logical order, starting with accounting, segueing into, valuation, LBO, merger modeling stuff. So and I like how you separated the videos from like, like the foundation core stuff to like sort of like the advanced stuff that may be asked, just definitely like EBs and most BBs will ask them. But I like how you made it really easy as a user to navigate through the technical videos, but they were all really helpful, and it really explained these concepts in a way that I don't think the guides can really deliver.
Hmm. Okay. Let me drill down on that a little bit because I think, again, I understand what you're saying because it's my program, but like when I think about what I just heard from the point of view of someone who hasn't been through the program, when you say like, our training explains things in a way that the guides don't, like, what does that mean? Because when I think about the concepts that you have to learn from technicals, like they're the same, right? It's not like we're teaching you about different concepts. We're teaching you about the exact same concepts. So like, how's it better, or how is it different, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I remember you have like slides that you presented in the videos as well that sort of like covered pretty much every part of like accounting, valuation, merger modeling, LBOs. It pretty much covered like every part of what the interviewee should know about the process. So there was a lot of information on those slides. But other than that, I think just the way you explain it as like a teacher, that's probably the most effective way or the effective part of those videos, because you can like read those guides and just like read them, but not really understand, you know, the core concepts that are behind, you know, the answers to those questions. Because like, for example, I remember in the beginning, I think one of the videos you talked about just the basic time value of money, which a lot of kids, they don't learn unless you took like an economics course. It's a really basic concept, right? Like a dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow. But like it's literally the foundation for like valuation and like DCF. So if you don't have a good foundation when attacking those guides, like as a pre-med student, I can speak firsthand, you know, attacking those M&I 400 questionnaires or whatever. I was pretty clueless, and I was basically just memorizing, you know, I wasn't learning. And it was very common for me to like just go through the whole guide and then forget like at least, you know, 50-60% of what I was trying to absorb. So you definitely present it in a way, in you know, in a combination between, you know, your video, your face speaking and the slides and everything. They all go hand in hand, and effectively they definitely effectively taught me the concepts that I need to know to get my bulge bracket offer.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like it's the difference between actually learning the concepts without like just memorizing anything by brute force versus trying to memorize answers to hundreds of questions and then just hoping that when you go into the interview you're going to get asked those exact same questions, basically. Like that's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
two methodologies. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction for people who are maybe just starting out with the recruiting process, is that just memorizing hundreds of questions. I think like that used to work at one point, like many years ago. Um, but like the interviewers have gotten a lot more, I guess, sophisticated, if you want to call it that. Like they adapted with the times, right?
Yeah.
At some point, all the students started memorizing the same guides, like the same Wall Street Oasis guide and the Breaking into Wall Street 400 Questions guide, and the interviewers kind of figured that out. And so now it doesn't do them any good to just ask every single student like those exact same questions, because it doesn't help them figure out who's actually good and who's not, right? And so
Right.
start to ask questions that are like deliberately go out of their way to ask questions that are not like exactly from those guys, or they're gonna change things up and kind of like test you a little bit and see if you can actually like think on your feet and actually apply these concepts to different situations. And so if you don't actually truly understand these concepts and you're just memorizing, that you like nowadays in 2022, like we don't really see that strategy working anymore, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They literally go out of their way to, you know, ask really complex questions, and it's tough.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just like anything else, like things only get harder and more competitive over time, right? Like getting into good school now is a lot harder than it was 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Banking offer now is a lot harder than it was 10 years ago. It's just like with so much information online these days, there's like everyone has like the students today have access to way more resources than like back when I was recruiting, because I'm old, right?
Yeah.
And so, like everyone is a lot more prepared today than they were even like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so it's like at that point, if the level of competition has gone up, like what are you doing to stay ahead of that, right? As opposed to, you know, now if you're just doing the same things everyone else is doing, there really is no competitive advantage, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I
Right.
totally agree.
So, okay, so on the interview side of things, it sounds like just like having a teacher who's actually good at teaching the concepts to you helps you learn it better than like you just reading a guide or a textbook on your own. So that part makes sense. Was there anything else in the program that you felt like was different than like kind of like was a game changer for you or changed the way you went about, certain parts of the recruiting process?
Yeah, no, for sure. I forgot to mention it, but we have this Slack channel, like the Inner Wolf Pack. Um, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically all of the members have access to it, and you can at any time ask questions about literally anything. And if anywhere from like behavioral questions to technical questions to like even like whatever question you think is like really stupid to you, like you can ask it pretty much without the being worried about scrutiny or anything like that. Because usually, even if you think the question is dumb, a lot of kids will find it useful because we're all learning, we're all going through the process. And it was especially useful, I know, with like really like nuanced situations. Like I'd be even like with networking, sometimes things like just get really like confusing, like you don't know certain etiquette things, and the banking world is really weird sometimes. And Sam and Edward and the other mentors are definitely super helpful in helping navigate that. And on top of that, you can pretty much ask. Personally, I found the technical channel really helpful because just after learning like or going through like the behavioral questionnaire, I felt pretty confident with it because it was pretty good. Like it covered all my bases, I think. But like technical section of the interview, theoretically, like you can never over prepare for that. So I found myself, in a lot of like weird rabbit holes studying for that stuff. So I always felt comfortable asking questions in that technical channel. Like no matter how hard I thought they were, I knew someone in the channel would take the time to answer it thoughtfully. And it was just a great resource to have because you have to be able to ask questions, going through the process. And I always got the best answers, really timely too. Usually within like an hour, I would get answers to any questions I had. So that was definitely a game changer.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think the one thing that you mentioned about these Slack channels is like, one, obviously it allows you to have access to the coaches anytime and be able to ask questions and get responses in a timely manner. And by timely is like, for example, within the hour, like it's almost real time a lot of the times, right? And so that's like super valuable during recruiting because things are happening so quickly and everything's so fast paced. A lot of times you don't have the luxury of waiting like 2 or 3 days for someone to get back to you with a response, and like you just need to know right away, right?
Exactly.
But the second thing that a lot of people don't think about is like, not only do you get to ask questions, but you get to see, you said like you guys are all learning together from each other's questions. Like you get to see the questions that a lot of other people are asking inside of the community.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, like for students who are like going through the recruiting process, obviously everyone's going through it for the first time, right? And I would characterize most people as like, beginners at in terms of like when it comes to like how do you recruit effectively or how do you answer a lot of these questions. And so when you're a beginner or when you're a novice at something, a lot of times the hardest part is not like asking questions. The hardest part is like knowing what questions to ask, because like you don't know what you don't know, right? And so
Yeah.
by being able to like not only ask questions that you could think of, but more importantly, being able to see the questions that your peers are asking, what that ends up doing is it covers up a lot of your blind spots, meaning like questions that you wouldn't have thought of asking otherwise because you saw someone else ask it. You described it as a rabbit hole, but like now you're like, you can click in and see like, oh, what is the answer to this question? Or like, yeah, actually, I didn't think of this, but I want to know the answer to this too. And that
Yeah.
just accelerates your learning process, or like more importantly, it helps you learn things that you might have missed otherwise. Because like so many times we see students who are studying on their own, they just like, maybe you're reading a guide or you're reading a textbook or whatever, and you go through it once and you're like, in your head you're like, yeah, I think I get this, and you just move on, right? And then like
Yeah.
there are things that you miss, but you're not going to realize you missed something until you go into the interview and the interviewer asks you about some topic and you're like, oh, I thought I knew this, but I actually don't. But then like by then it's too late because now you just botched the interview, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so like I think like this is one of those things where I think investment banking can be like such a lonely process for most people because it's such a grind, and when you're going through it on your own, you don't have anyone helping you, and you don't have anyone you can go to and ask for help, or you don't have anyone that you're like going through the struggle with, and it's like that can feel very lonely versus like if you have a community of like just like-minded students and you guys are all working towards the same goal, you guys are asking questions together, learning together, helping each other out, sharing intel, like all the things that we do at Wall Street National, like it makes it a lot more, I don't want to say it's not fun. Recruiting is never fun, but it makes it a lot more bearable. It's like, okay,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
myself, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's been countless times when I've checked like the technical channel, I've seen like, oh crap, are we supposed to know like tax structures and stuff like that? So I would definitely, even still sometimes I would look through that channel and see what other people are asking. That's a very valid point.
Yeah. I always tell everyone too, is like, hey, even if you don't have any questions, just check these channels once a day and see what other people are asking, right?
Yeah.
Even if you never ask a single question, like you still learn a ton of stuff, right? Like, and so that's like, I think like immersing yourself in the right environment and just like this just give you such a huge boost, to on top of your own efforts, of course, like you have to put in the work. So that makes sense. So, what about like on the networking side? Like, because you said that before you came in, you were networking people, but the conversations weren't really that effective, and you didn't really know how to like get them to do the thing that you wanted them to do, which is like ultimately, obviously, like refer you for the interview, right? So, like, did you see any changes on that side once you joined the program?
Yeah, I know for sure. There were a lot of nice tidbits that you had in the networking module that definitely helped me in approaching these phone calls. And it was mostly like in preparation. So like one thing you'd suggest us to do was like sort of like look up the person we're going to talk with at least on LinkedIn, and, see if they have if there's any commonalities or any like mutual things that you have in common, which was actually like a pretty big game changer because typically like the first few minutes of the phone call, they can really tell. They immediately begin judging you, and like they typically, I feel like there's no statistics behind this, but I think within the first few minutes, they sort of decide whether they like you or not. So if you started off really good, then they're already on your side. Like it's going to be pretty hard to mess it up. Whereas the opposite is true as well. So definitely starting off the calls right, talking about, if they're into sports, be like, yeah, did you watch the Lakers game last night? Yada yada yada. And sort of seeing if there's anything that we can build off of to start with, just to make the whole process easier. Um, it would definitely improve my chances for them to do something nice after the call, like push my name forward, push my resume to their supervisor, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think that was the most powerful advice I got. There were a lot of like small tidbits that I got that probably made a big change in my approach, but they were all really helpful, definitely like in preparing the questions, especially like I think the biggest problem was like in between like talking to like an analyst and an MD, I really didn't know. I used to, overthink that a lot and not understand, like, can I ask the same questions? How much should my questions vary between, different, hierarchies within the bank? So sort of seeing what your feedback was, sort of what, and again the Slack channel, what other people's experiences have been with like talking to MDs and VPs and how that differs from analysts. Like I remember, I think a lot of people said, like talking to MDs is actually pretty chill. Like usually these guys are the most laid back people. They're the ones that can usually most of the 45 minutes of the call will usually just be them rambling on, and you probably talking for like maybe 5-10 minutes at the max. So these were like having that community that has gone through several of these phone calls. We just basically have crowdsourced a lot of like data and experiences, and being able to have access to that and access to other people's advice and what they went through was super important, I think, going into this. And as well as just the general advice you have, it's a lot of it, it seems like common sense, but as a college student, I really didn't have a good grasp of it. So it helped a lot.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think, one thing that you just mentioned I want to highlight is like the benefit or the competitive advantage of having like crowdsourced data and experience, right? And I think like just to elaborate on that for some of our listeners, what that means, like examples of that. I mean, there's a lot of examples, but for example, a lot of our clients, after they go through an interview, they will submit the list of questions that they got from the interview into like a centralized database, right? And then you can go in a database and see like, what bank was it, like what location, which round was it? Was it first round, second round, super day? Was it with a specific group? And then like literally the exact questions that were asked. And I think we now have like, I don't know, like somewhere in the hundreds of entries in the database. And so now it's like anyone in the future who's trying to like prepare for an interview, or maybe they have an interview coming up with a certain firm, before the interview, like it's really helpful to just go in the database and see like, hey, are there any entries for the firm that I'm interviewing with? And if so, like you can get a sense for these are the types of questions that might get asked, right? And like that helps you with like how you want to spend your time in terms of preparation, right? So like that's one example. And like another example would be um, like maybe the place that you're about to interview with, maybe we have an alumni that's already working there, right? Or maybe maybe we don't have an alumni that's working there, but we definitely have people that have interviewed with them before, or even gotten offers, but just didn't go there and they went somewhere else. You can still be connected to those people and speak with them and learn more about like their experience and what it was like interviewing with that firm, or so on and so forth. Like what to look out for. Were there any curveball questions that they asked? And that type of like cumulative experience or institutional knowledge is just like, it's hard to find anywhere else, because at this point, like we have placed students into like pretty much every single bulge bracket and elite boutique bank out there. So it's like, it doesn't matter what bank you want to go for, like we probably have someone you can talk to about that, right? And
Yeah.
that's
No,
a
no.
huge leg up, right?
Yeah, I know. I've seen that database or like the spreadsheet. It was super helpful. Definitely used that a few times before going into the interview, and yeah, a lot of data. And the beauty about it is like as clients come in, it's just growing and growing. So
Yeah.
by the time the people listening to this phone call join, I bet it will be way more useful than it was for me, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, and it's not even like, I mean, it's a network effect, right? But like, it's not even just for things like uh, interview questions database or whatever. Like, yes, that stuff is valuable, but like the way you should think about it too is like, it's almost like you're joining, I don't know, like a business fraternity or something, right? Like you're joining literally a network of people, like most of whom are going to be starting their careers on Wall Street. They're going to be working at these top banks, bulge brackets, elite boutiques, whatever, middle markets. And that network is just going to continue to grow. But like in the future, like, most of our clients are going to go on and do very, very successful things. Like most people probably won't stay in banking, if I'm being completely honest, but like people are going to go to the buy side and work in PE, hedge funds, VCs, they're going to be working at Fortune 100 companies, whatever it may be. Like that's a very valuable network to be a part of. Like you never know when you're going to need help. Like maybe you want to apply to a certain firm somewhere and we already have someone working there, right? And now you have someone you can speak to, now you have someone you can network with. And that's priceless, right? And who knows like how else this network might help each other out down the road. But like at the age that I'm at now, like one thing that I've come to understand is just like, they always say like your network is your net worth, right? Like I've just found that to be so true. It's like the more successful your network is, like the more successful you're gonna be, right? Because like
Yeah.
people kind of end up congregating or like being drawn to people that are like at a similar level as themselves, right? And so like if you surround yourself with people that are really, really successful, like you have no choice but to be successful with them, right? And it's just like the things you talk about, the information that you're sharing, and like the opportunities that are available, like the that only happens at the like the quality of those things only happens based on like the quality of your network, basically, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's turning into like a small school, honestly, at this point, in terms of like the amount of alumni and the tightness.
Yeah,
Definitely something to admire.
yeah. I mean, we have our own alumni network, and like in the future, like I mean, it's already starting to kind of happen a little bit just organically, but we haven't been like very organized about it. But in the future, as we get bigger and bigger, like we do have plans to make it even more formalized in terms of like finding ways for people to help each other out through our network. So like that's something that we're really excited about as well in terms of like just our vision and stuff. So I guess like with all that said, like sounds like you know it helped you in several different ways when it comes to recruiting. Ultimately, at the end of this whole process, because like you joined in December of sophomore year, and then like when did you like finally finish recruiting? Like how long was that process for you?
Uh, it was probably 8 months, but I was also preparing before that, to be fair. So I'd
Yeah,
say minimum a year, honestly, in
yeah,
terms of like when I realized I want to do it, starting the preparation and then getting the offer, probably more than a year, honestly.
yeah. So it was like, but so it's a long journey, right? But it's like 4 months prepping on your own, and then what? About 8 months in Wall Street Mastermind before you finish, right?
Yeah.
And like ultimately, like what was a successful outcome for you in the end?
Yeah, I got a bulge bracket offer. And I was super excited about it. And honestly, if you think about it, the amount of preparation I was doing before I joined Washermite, it was pretty much the same amount of time, but like the effectiveness was like at least 20x, 10x, 20x. So, really grateful to have um, been part of this program and have that structure. Because I don't think I would have this offer would have materialized if I hadn't had all these resources.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you said something key there, which is like you you put in the same amount of time before and after the program, but the effectiveness was 10 20x. Like I think like what people need to realize is like it's not that if you join this program, then it's gonna all of a sudden be like super easy and effortless, and all of a sudden you don't have to put in any work. Like it's still investment banking recruiting, right? Like
Yeah.
you still have to go out and like fight your way into like this offer, and you're still competing against a lot of really really qualified people. But the difference is like for the same amount of effort, like you're still going to give it your best, but like for the same amount of effort, what are you getting out of that, right? Like the most frustrating part of investment banking recruiting for the vast majority of the people is they try so hard and then in the end they have nothing to show for it, right? Like it's not
Hmm.
like most of the people that don't end up getting banking jobs it's not just because they were lazy or they didn't try. Like I would say the majority of the people that failed, like they still tried really, really hard, but it just wasn't good enough because there are only so many jobs, right? And so like
Right.
you only have 24 hours in a day, and as a student who's trying to break into recruiting, like just think about how much stuff you have going on. Like you got to maintain really really good grades. That for most people is already like a full-time job in and of itself. But like on top of that, like you were doing internships on the side, right, to get relevant experience and build up your resume. You got to network with so many bankers. Like each call takes 30 minutes, and that's not including like the time you have to spend sending out emails just to get them on a call, right?
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
yeah, you gotta learn the technicals, you gotta learn the behaviorals, you gotta take on leadership positions at school and in like clubs and whatnot. Like there's just so many things going on. And so like for the same amount of time, like the same 24 hours that you have in a day, like how much can you get out of it? Like how much can you get done?
Exactly. And the beauty about it is like I don't think I worked that much harder. I was just expending my efforts in like the right areas. Like I was actually, as I said, I was a lot more methodical once I joined this program, as to how I was spending my time, as to how I was approaching certain things like networking emails, networking calls, technical preparation. So honestly, in retrospect, I bet I was busting my chops harder before the program, but like just in the most chaotic, like mess of a way possible. But like once I joined the program, it all just started to click and come together. And it wasn't magic either. I still was busting my chops, but I had the support of so many people that were smart, that went through the process, and
Yeah,
at the end it materialized. So.
I think like a really good way to sum it up is like, there's like working hard, which you were already doing before the program, and then there's like working smart, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you work smart, like it's still going to take effort, but like it doesn't have to be as hard as you're making it right now, right? It was like most people just make this way harder than it needs to be, and it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Hmm.
So anyway, that's really really insightful, man. I guess like just to wrap things up, like I always like to end on this question, which is now that you're on the other side, you have an offer. As you think back on this process, like, do you have one piece of advice that you would like to pass down to maybe like younger folks who are about to go through the process now? Like maybe something that someone told you at one point that really, really helped you out. Like, do you have any words of wisdom or things like that that you want to pass along?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So thinking back on my entire like period of preparation, even before the program, the one thing that remained constant was like the element of perseverance. Had that faded away, I don't think I would have gotten the offer. I can almost say with 100% certainty.
Hmm.
You know, the perseverance is just something, either you can, sort of summon it extrinsically. You can say things like, oh, I want a really good paying job, I want to impress my friends or whatever, or really find like a deeper, value in like the experience itself intrinsically. Either way, that's going to vary from person to person. But just get to that level of perseverance, and when you have it, and when you're, trust me, like things just become a lot more easier. The motivation comes. uh it will make things a lot, these things just don't materialize out of thin air. These are things that you have to work hard for. You have to think about it constantly, not to the point of like, you know driving yourself insane, but um it's definitely something that it should kind of take over your life in like a healthy way. And really just, it should be something that you think about when you wake up. It should be, maybe not the last thing you think about before you go to sleep, but I have to admit, a lot of a lot of the times it was. So just having that perseverance, it will really make things easier, and it's really the only surefire way, that I can at least say in retrospect, a way to get, an offer, or get whatever job you want.
No, I think you're absolutely right on that. It's like, having worked with hundreds of students, I can say like most of the people who successfully get offers, like they go all in on this process, right? Like by all in, it's like in all of their waking hours, like they're constantly like doing something that's moving them one step closer to their end,
Yeah,
right? Like what, like, because going back to what I said earlier is like, but like, okay, you're trying to keep up your grades in school, right? But like on top of that, you're trying to do internships. That's moving you closer. You're trying to network with bankers. That's moving you closer. You're prepping for interviews. That's moving you closer. You might be like taking on leadership activities on campus. That's moving you closer. Like, but all of these things, it's all kind of contributing towards the same.
exactly.
And by the time you're done with all those things that I just listed, like, let's be honest, usually you don't really have much time for anything else, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so like it's like you said, like for you, that was like a year-long process, and that can feel like a long time. But also at the same time, you think about it like, once that ended and you got your offer, like, I mean, you got it pretty much like at the beginning of junior year was when you got your offer, right? And then so like now for the rest of your college, like for the last 2 years in college, like you don't have to worry about like where's my job going to come from anymore, right? There is like that reward, that payoff in the end, which is like you have job security, not even just job security, but like you have a great job lined up, right? And it's
exactly.
that's a phenomenal feeling, right? And so
Yeah,
you pay your dues early, and then after that, like you do whatever you want, right?
exactly. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's that much more rewarding too. Like when you put your like heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears through it, and for it to pay off in such like a grand way. it just makes it that much more enjoyable, and it opens up time for other things. You can really focus on yourself. Just know it, even if it feels like, suffering at times, it's temporary. And just that's why you have to have the perseverance. You have to have some type of motivation, at the end of the day. And that will keep you going, and just don't give up.
Right. Yeah, man, absolutely. Really insightful advice for sure. So I think a lot of people benefit from that. So thank you. I
Yeah,
guess,
no problem.
yeah, for those of you who are still listening to this, um, if you're currently going through the process, you're about to go through the process, maybe you're like Chris, like you've been going at this for a while on your own, but you know that you're working really, really hard, but just not quite like getting the results that you're looking for, right? Like working hard, but not necessarily working smart, and you're just looking for a better way. Then I want to encourage you to like reach out and schedule a call with our team, right? Like that's always the first step. Is like, let's schedule a call, hop on with our team, help us learn more about your situation and like what it is that you're struggling with and what do you need help with right now. And then like, based on that, like we can map out a game plan for you in terms of like what we think you should be doing and just give you some advice on these strategy sessions is what we call them. And like, hey, if everything sounds great and like you want our help implementing some of the advice that we give you, like we'd be happy to talk about that. But like, even if not, you can take the advice that we give you and go out and just like execute it on your own. And that's totally fine too, So either way though, we have a lot of experience doing this. We've helped almost 500 students at this point, over 90% success rate. And like most of our clients, like they end up at either like bulge bracket or elite boutique banks, right? And so like this is going to be one of you like the one of the most valuable calls you could possibly have during your recruiting preparation process. So if you guys want to do that, call's completely free, but you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And just we look forward to talking to you. All right. And so with that said, Chris, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today. This is really, really helpful. Just like letting other people hear your story, letting people know that, hey, even if you don't, like you go to a semi-target school or some people go to non-target schools, like you don't have to go to like Harvard or Wharton or Columbia necessarily to break into investment banking. You just need to have the right approach and have a more methodical way of doing things so that you can be more efficient. And if you can do that, you can probably get into banking too, right? So thank you for coming on and sharing your experience. Look forward to seeing all the success you have during your internship this upcoming summer at the Bulge Bracket Bank. And if there's anything else that you need help with, like obviously don't be a stranger. You know how to find us, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Sam. It was a pleasure, and good luck to everybody out there. I know you'll find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. So that'll be it for today. It's a wrap, and thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these client interviews for you guys in the near future. And until then, we'll talk to you next time. All right. Bye.